In this video, we're just going to look at taking our 2-point perspective boxes and splitting the boxes or subdividing the boxes to become separate parts, separate pieces. So we could sketch something like this one to begin with, or just a standard box. So we'll just very quickly, I'll sketch a normal box. So let me just get my angles right. Okay, so there's my starting point. Okay, vertical line. Again, we'll start as normal with our bottom V. I'm going to just add for the sides of the box in this instance. So we'll just add parallel lines for this one. Okay, slightly wider on one side than the other. It doesn't really matter at all though. And then let's make a decision on where the top of the box is. So let's say about there. Let's get our sheet, let's flatten it. So if that's our angle before, let's turn our sheet so we've got a flatter angle. Something like that. That looks like they're going to meet over here. That's good. Let's spin it round. Okay, and that's the thing, is always just having a look and thinking, are they going to meet? Got to try and get away from that parallel line. That one's a bit too flat now, too harsh. So let's try that one again. Perhaps something like that. It's definitely different than this one. That's good. So we've got a new point there. So then let's use that point. And again, there's the last line I drew. So let's flatten something like that. Okay, they're going to meet over here somewhere. And then lastly, we want this one coming over here. Probably something like that. So let's just sketch it in properly now. So there is let's have a look. This is the line that we drew before. So we want that, but we want to flatten it ever so slightly. So perhaps something like that. And there's our box. So what we're now going to do, once we've got our box, is look at dividing the box up. Okay, so first of all, we'll pick a face to divide it on. So we'll divide this box on this side, okay, in this instance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a mark here on that line, and I'm just going to run a parallel line, pretty much parallel. Angle does slightly change, but I'll go across like that. So that's our line. And then I'm actually going to add a second one very close. So we're going to do this almost like a groove into our work. Okay, so we've got parallel lines in that instance. Then what we're going to do is we're going to drop, instead of dropping a vertical line, we're actually going to do it at an angle just to make it a little bit more interesting. So if there is a vertical line, something like that, we'll perhaps bring our diagonal line here. So what I'm going to do from this point, okay, so to do that, to sketch properly, I'm doing it from left to right, which is the angle that I tend to work at. Okay, something like that. And then I'm going to do the other one in a similar way. Okay, something like that. So now I've got these two extra lines. But what I want to do is make this look as though either it's two separate boxes or that we've got a groove cut out and then we've got another surface. So what I need to do is use this point here and this point here to kind of look at the angles of our perspective. So in this case, there is my angle. So what I want to do is get a very similar angle on the inside. Okay, so something like that. Same on here, but we're not going to a perspective line. We're using this angle because we're trying to say that it would be the same. So if we imagine dropping that down on the inside, something like that. So that's going to give us that point there. So then what we need to do is just decide, is this a groove or is this a gap or a hole? So if we make it a groove, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to make it a little point here. And that point, I'm then just going to follow my perspective lines that I've had before. And then this one, I'm actually going to do more slowly, just so you can see this. Okay, and it's kind of, I suppose, more critical because we're trying to get the line just to get a little bit thinner as it goes towards the top of the groove here. And then we will just go across also over here to that point there. And then once we've got that, we can follow our existing points. Now, that's probably not very clear right now. In other words, we can't see it very easily. So I'm just going to press a little bit harder with my pencil now, just going over the top of this. So hopefully those lines become a little bit clearer. Problem when I press harder with a 0.7 mechanical pencil often is that the lead snaps, just like that. Okay, this is where In actual fact, this is often where I use my other pencil, my 0.9, because the lead, just that little bit thicker, allows more pressure when sketching something like a darker line. So if I just, all I'm trying to do now is just pencil in those so you can see what's happening. Okay, we'll just go up there and we've got a thinner line here. It's just going to go up to that point. Okay, and we've got our inner corner here. So let's keep that going across to there. This one, there you go, snapping the lead again. This one needs to be much darker. This becomes like our thick line here. And then we're just trying to define these lines now with sharp lines or thin lines, just so things stand out a little bit. So this part now, I suppose, is very technical in terms of what we're trying to achieve. And often it can be hard to see it clearly, which is why we would use a little bit of shading. Now, of course, we could do that with marker. In this instance, I'm very, very quickly just going to do a little bit of diagonal shading very softly with my blue pencil, just so you can see this lip coming through and like trying to describe what is happening. So there's, as you can see now, that's like a cut. Of course, other things that we could do as well, should we wish, we can actually, using our existing shape, if we really wanted to, we could actually start manipulating this and bend it a little bit, which can become quite fun. So if I just show you what I mean by that is, if I use my point here and following my perspective line, but imagining from here, perhaps that I have a curved surface, perhaps something like that. So what I'm going to do, and I'm actually going to come out of my original perspective box. So I'm going to make this more like this kind of shape. Okay, so we've got a line coming out here, going through there to that point. So I'm going to keep the front of the box more or less where it was. Of course, I darkened this a moment ago, which ideally, perhaps I should have waited. I'm just going to add that same kind of curve in here. And what we're going to do actually on this part is we're going to bring that front of that box down a little bit. Okay, so we're just curving it. So I'm going to add a little bit the back of the box now. So again, what I want to do now is look at my perspective line and think, right, okay, this needs to be slightly flatter because it's further away towards the back. So let's just go something like that. I'm going to swap pencils, so I've got my thinner pencil again. Okay, and just a bit nicer. So perhaps something like that, and then I might have my new point here, and let's just connect that. Okay, as I say, this is just kind of a bit of fun now, really, with the perspective, because the box, I'm using the verticals, was our original perspective, but by just moving a few lines, we can, of course, start to play a little bit more. So again, let's just define one or two of these, a little bit harder with my pencil. Let's get the front of this box. So we're going to do this. And of course, once we move this curve, our outer line changes, and actually our outer line now becomes here. So let's just pencil in something like that. Okay, so we now moved our box, and we can get our corner point here. We'll keep the corner sharp in this one. You could do a very subtle, like little rounded edge like that. Sometimes that softens the shape and just makes it perhaps a little bit nicer. So we've got the rest of the box. Okay, but what we're going to do now, so we've got this groove running through the box. I'm just a bit unhappy with this. There's like too many lines. So let's just carefully try and define a little bit more. Okay, a bit happier now. And again, I'm just trying to define this edge. And actually I'm going to make this a little bit darker, just as we're working, so you can see that this will stand out a little bit more. Okay, so what I'm now going to do is look at adding a lip on this box here on the front of it, and then we're going to go in. So what I'm going to do is just sketch very lightly, going to follow vertical lines, and then I'm going to more or less follow, okay, what we already have. Let's say we won't go all the way to the top, we'll go drop it down a little bit more, perhaps something like that. Okay, so we've got this inner rectangle. So this is going to be a lip for the box. Now, because it's a lip, and if we apply the thick and thin lines rule, this edge here would be dark, because if something were on this edge and then it crawls around on this surface and it goes around inside, it disappears. Therefore, that's a thick line. Out here in Thailand, we have geckos. So a gecko going on this surface goes inside. I'd often talk about a spider, and a spider being on the surface and disappearing. So what I know is that line's not going to change. So trying not to break all the lead of my pencil, I'm just going to press a little bit harder, like so. Okay, so I know that line's not going to change. I also know that this top line will be the same, so we can define those and put those lines in. Now, inner lines, okay, so here we go. This is the inner line. So what we want to do now is on the inside of here, this is our line to the vanishing point. There's our line to the vanishing points, okay, from the inner part here of our edge, okay, just adding a slight little round there. Okay, so then what we want to do, we can now we've got what is our outer surface and what ultimately becomes a lip, we could start playing around with the inside of the shape, perhaps a little bit more. So perhaps what we could do is we'll put a curve on. Okay, so we get this, and we'll make the front of this slightly rounded, like that. And then let's put a point on that line and let's copy it. Okay, so we've got a similar kind of curve on the inside, and then let's go to this corner here. And then just to map the surface, just so you can see, that's as though that would go to that point. But the purpose of this is not to try and do a hollow box or a frame at this point. It was actually to potentially look at maybe modeling something on the inside. So if we add in, let's just use that, and again, following our perspective guides, let's say something like that. I'm just going to give it a slight chamfer. Oh, sorry, chamfer like that, and then like that, okay? So I'm just looking at trying to add to my inner shape. So if I follow this line down, which would give me the back of the box, that would come here. So perhaps actually this shape, this object, it couldn't be any bigger than that point there. So let's just add that in. Let's drop that in there, something like that. And again, we could add more detail. So let's just following our perspective guidelines, just showing you the principle with the lip again. So there is our shape following my perspective lines. This is the part that students often get wrong. They suddenly forget about perspective lines and just draw in a shape that they think is right. And often that's where it looks very wrong, because all edges connect to the vanishing points, pretty much. And that's a good rule to follow in terms of sketching in two-point perspective. So there's a basic shape. I'm just going to map that now to a similar surface, so you'll be able to see. So I'll get a slight curve, perhaps something like that. And then let's just add in a little bit detail. And of course, we could add in a little bit of shadow, possibly just to start to define it. Maybe on something like this, we could sketch an ellipse, and if I do a second ellipse just above it, like here, then perhaps following our perspective lines, maybe this becomes like some form of dial, button, circular thing sticking out, whatever you may wish it to be. But that's kind of like a quick principle of sketching that. And then what I would do is probably define this line a little bit further, so become a little bit darker in the line, and possibly then there's even opportunities where you may add a bit more cross-hatching, shadows, just to define things, because things will disappear, particularly with blue pencil, like in terms of they become more fuzzy, so you want to get that weight of line so that doesn't happen, ideally. Okay, so let's say something like this, just as you can see, pretty quick rough sketch, and let's just add in over here. And I would always darken this line at the bottom because I always try to get objects to sit on the page. So I always say that the bottom object's always darker. So if we follow that rule, this line would always be a little bit thicker. There's a little bit of woolliness going on here, woolliness because it's not defined very clearly, so perhaps just a bit sharper line. Again, the outside line would be darker because the outer edges would be darker. And there's kind of like the idea, you know, and after that, if you wanted to, is the type of thing you could always very, very quickly just add a little bit of shadow, that type of thing. And I'll just add a vertical one like that. And that's going to give you a split, okay, in the shape, in 2-point perspective. And then we've done some inner detailing with the lip. And of course, I suppose a last detail as well, you could perhaps show different materials. If this was just going to remain as a sketch, you could maybe show perhaps a different material for the back, this back part here, by following almost with parallel lines to what you've already got, the shape, to add just a bit of toning. Try not to get those kind of lines. You want to try and, as much as possible, keep them nice straight lines. Perhaps something like that. So all I'm trying to do is just show that this is different material than this one, for example. But normally I would then take this, I would use marker pen following this part here now. I would use marker pen on different surfaces, and of course I would add fine line pen and so on. So that is adding inner lip, a groove, or splitting surfaces together.